I didn't believe in paranormal things before this apartment. I really didn't. But every single night, at exactly 3 a.m., someone is in my kitchen. It's not a dream. I can hear the pan clattering on the stove, the sharp, rhythmic chop of a knife hitting the cutting board. I can even hear the gas stove clicking on, that little spark just before the flame catches. And the worst part? The part that makes my blood run cold? I live completely alone. I moved into this apartment just 2 weeks ago. It was supposed to be a fresh start. New place, new neighborhood. It's a quiet building, you know? The kind of quiet that almost feels too quiet, like the air is holding its breath. When I signed the lease, the landlord mentioned the previous tenant left suddenly. I didn't press for details. I didn't want to seem nosy. Looking back, I should have asked every single question I could think of. The first night was totally normal. Unpacking boxes, ordering a pizza, the usual stuff. But the second night, something changed. I woke up with a jolt. The clock on my phone read 3 a.m., and there was a sound coming from the kitchen. A faint, grating noise. Metal scraping against metal. I tried to convince myself it was just the building settling or maybe a neighbor upstairs. But then I smelled it. The distinct, unmistakable smell of fried onions wafting through my apartment. I hadn't cooked onions. I hadn't cooked anything. I just lay there in my bed completely still, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. I strained my ears, listening. And that's when I heard the footsteps. They were in the kitchen. Slow, calm, measured footsteps. They didn't sound frantic or like an intruder. They sounded familiar. Like someone who knew the layout of the kitchen perfectly, who had walked that floor 1,000 times. I heard a heavy pan hit the stove with a soft thud. Then the unmistakable sizzle of oil heating up. A drawer slid open. Then closed with a gentle click. Whoever it was, or whatever it was, they weren't trying to be quiet. They weren't sneaking around. They were comfortable. It was as if this was their kitchen, and I was the one who didn't belong. Every sound was so clear, so deliberate. It was the sound of someone making a late-night meal, completely at ease. And that was the most terrifying part. My hand was shaking as I reached for my phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up the dark room. 3:07 a.m. No missed calls, no messages. Just me, awake and terrified. I took a deep breath and forced myself to move, to slide out of bed. My feet were ice cold on the wooden floor. I crept to my bedroom door, opening it just a crack. A sliver of light was spilling out from the kitchen into the hallway. The kitchen light was on. My heart sank. I pushed the door open wider and peeked around the corner. The stove was on, a low blue flame flickering under an empty pan. But there was no one there. The room was empty. Then my eyes landed on the counter. A dirty knife lay next to the cutting board. The pan on the stove was still warm to the touch, and right next to it was a plate. A plate with freshly cooked food on it. Food I didn't cook. Food that wasn't there when I went to bed. It happened again the next night, and the night after that. And the night after that, it became a routine. My new, horrifying routine. Every single night like clockwork. Always at 3 a.m., the sounds would start. Sometimes it was cooking, the sizzle and chop and the clatter of utensils. Other times, it was the sound of plates being washed in the sink, water running, the soft clinking of ceramic. Once I even heard someone humming a tune I didn't recognize. A low, melancholic melody that echoed through the silent apartment. I stopped getting up to check. What was the point? I knew what I would find, an empty kitchen with signs that someone had just been there. I just pulled the covers over my head and tried to block it out. But one night, the sounds were different. I heard the usual kitchen noises, but then I heard a chair scrape against the floor. The sound of someone pulling it out from the small kitchen table. And then the faint creak of someone sitting down to eat. I couldn't live like this anymore. I was barely sleeping, constantly on edge. I went online and bought a cheap security camera. The kind you use to watch your pets. I placed it on top of the fridge, pointing directly at the kitchen. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I just sat up in bed staring at my phone, waiting. The minutes ticked by. 2:58. 2:59. Then, exactly at 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A notification popped up on the screen. Motion detected. My fingers trembled as I opened the live feed. My screen showed my kitchen, bathed in the eerie green glow of the camera's night vision. It was empty. Completely empty. But then, a cabinet door swung open all by itself. Then another. The stove knob turned, clicking on with that familiar sound. A pan that was sitting on the counter began to slide across the granite surface, slowly, deliberately, as if pushed by an invisible hand. My whole body went rigid. And then, the camera's microphone picked up a sound. A faint, raspy whisper, so close it sounded like it was right next to my ear. It said, "You're home early." The next morning, I was a wreck. But I was also determined. I had to know what was happening in my apartment. I started searching the place from top to bottom, looking for anything out of the ordinary, any explanation. I checked every closet, every corner. Finally, in the back of the pantry behind a loose shelf, my fingers brushed against something that wasn't wall. It was a seam, a faint outline. A door. It had been painted over, plastered and painted again and again, to make it almost completely invisible. I wedged my fingers into the crack and pulled. With a groan of old wood, it swung inward, revealing a small, hidden room. The air inside was stale and thick. On the floor was a dirty mattress, a stack of old plates. And on a small crate, there was a calendar. Every single date was crossed out in thick, angry red ink. Every date, except one. Today's date was circled. Tonight, I'm not going to sleep. I can't. It's 2:58 a.m. right now. I'm sitting in the dark living room, staring at the entryway to my kitchen. The camera is off. My phone is off. It's just me and the silence. A silence that feels heavier than ever before. Because I just heard it. The familiar click of the gas stove turning on. And this time it's different. This time, there's a voice. And it's calling my name.